Spoiler alert, spoiler alert, there's gonna be so many spoilers in this. Don't watch it if you haven't watched the entire show or like even most of the show, please. There's gonna be spoilers, oh my god. Hello everybody, today I'm going to be talking about the spirituality, the hidden spirituality of Avatar: The Last Airbender. This show is #1 on Netflix right now, and it's crazy because this was my top favorite show as I was a kid. I was salty a little in the beginning. I totally think it deserves its recognition and fame though, because it has so many beautiful lessons and it's crafted so perfectly and it integrates so much of the history of this world that like we subconsciously have absorbed, such as like the colonization that the Fire Nation did. Just things like that. It's so familiar to us, yet it's so new, and I honestly have no complaints about the show. Whatever they decided, 4th season or not, it was their decision, right? I think it's perfect as it is right now. So let's get into it. The 7, maybe 8 hidden spiritual messages of Avatar: The Last Airbender. The first one I have to share with you is the personalities of both the benders and a nation coincide with their element. So if you're very familiar with astrology, or you know about air, water, earth, fire within astrology, and you know what kind of emotions and personalities they dictate, you'd be familiar with this. In astrology, air is passive but intuitive. Fire is aggressive but proactive. It gets a lot of things done, but its downside is its aggressiveness. Water is over emotional, and that's a downside too. Emotionality, being open to our emotions, is great, but over emotionality can be a big downfall. But at the same time, water is healing. And 4th, earth is stubborn, but it's also stable. So isn't that amazing that all these 4 elements coincide with the bender and the nation's bending styles and their personalities as well? Of course there's going to be exceptions, but it's just cool to think that they had these things in mind when creating the show. So the second one I have for you is that the Avatar state was actually their higher self. So both for Aang and for Korra, when they weren't aligned with their spiritual self, their avatar state actually came out when they needed it most, when they were in a time of most turmoil and they lost all love and hope of the world and their mission. It came out, but being in the avatar state was uncontrollable for them, and it was actually quite difficult to come out of it or just, you know, control while you're there. Spirit took over the avatar when they were in the avatar state and they hadn't mastered it. Throughout the whole show, it shows their journey. One of the big themes is mastering their own spirituality and their higher self, getting in tune with it. They were able to bring peace where it was needed, and that was aligning with their higher purpose, which was to bring balance to it all, because the avatar is... I sound like I'm repeating the show if you've already seen it, but the avatar balances the human and the spirit worlds. And I truly think that this is very parallel to our own higher self. So the word avatar is actually a Sanskrit word for a reincarnation, and specifically this show did it really well because reincarnations in ancient Hinduism were Ram or Krishna, right? And these two people, well, these two avatars had a lot more godliness to them. So Aang in this show and Korra, they both have more godliness or spirit self in them. They are half spirit, half human. But we also have a spirit to us that we don't really recognize until we start working on it, until we get in tune with it. We become aligned with our higher self when we recognize our own purpose in this world and we connect to our spirituality. And, you know, I have all these videos on my channel to do that. So if you'd like to watch them, go ahead. As you could see, the Avatar's work was never done. Korra had a long 4 seasons of different battles that she had to face, and much of it was becoming in tune with her spiritual side, and that's something I'll talk about later in this video. And same for us, that our spiritual journey never actually ends, and it is in fact the climb that matters. Miley Cyrus was right, you guys. And so aligning with our spirit and awakening is a continuous journey that we always have to be aware of. That's why in Avatar: The Last Airbender, as well as Korra, it was a continuous journey to become more aligned and more aware of what it is that they truly need to do and what spirit is trying to tell them. The third thing I have for you is, isn't it so cool that everybody wore the clothing of their own roots, of their nation? Even in Korra, this was evident. If you saw in Republic City, you could spot somebody or their heritage, their lineage, through what they were wearing. If they were wearing reds and oranges and black, sometimes they were Fire Nation. If they were wearing yellows and oranges, flowy clothes, they were air. If they were wearing light green, dark green, just different forms of green, they were earth, and water was different shades of white, right? And you know what? I actually thought this was kind of weird, because I thought, why even in Republic City, in Korra, did they want everyone to be divided by what they wear and what their lineage is, right? Personally, that's very interesting that I had that thought, because I used to grow up not accepting my heritage as much as I do now. You can, maybe other immigrants and Indian Americans can attest to this. But after becoming more in tune with my roots, I realized, like, this is actually so important. It's so beautiful that they kept characters in the show true to their heritage, and just by their clothing, you could see that. Because spirit actually gives us our body and our lineage in order to learn from it. So we're given our specific bodies and our specific reality, our specific whatever it is, for a very important reason, and that also includes our lineage, our heritage, and the roots that we come from. It is the divine feminine, aka Mother Earth, who chooses this for us. You could say that your higher self chooses this for you as well, but basically it's Mother Earth that gives us our bodies or our lineage for our spirit to experience the world through this vessel, right? And there's always a reason behind it. Denying our heritage and our roots actually separates us from our truth and the purpose that we are given this life and this ability to be on this earth for. So they were definitely aware of these costumes when dressing the characters, and I do think this was a choice, a spiritual choice at that, in showing that it's so important to be connected to your own roots. Whether you deny it, that's on you, but I do think that it's important eventually, and we do end up going down that path. If you haven't found out the nature of your roots and why you were given it, sometimes these questions are hard to ask. Sometimes you just take it for granted and you're like, yes, this is beautiful, I love this. Or you're on the complete other side, we're like, why was I given this? This makes no sense. Like, I don't care. I want to separate from my roots. Whether you're on either side, you will eventually find yourself connecting farther with your roots and learning why it was that you were given the body that you were. Why you were given the ancestors that you were. A lot of spiritual people do work with their ancestors actually, but some people also use the ancestry of others and weird things end up happening. I don't know if you've heard about the case where somebody not of this lineage started using the Loa spirits and they actually harmed this person. So it's dangerous to try to get involved with other people's roots and try to take it for granted. It actually can be considered a form of colonialism. But that's a much deeper topic, and I just wanted to put that out for food for thought. The fourth thing I have for you is that Zuko was given his lineage, it ties back to the previous one, because he had to break generational curses and generational trauma. In the beginning of Avatar: The Last Airbender, I absolutely hated this guy. Like, obviously he was created for us to hate, but his character development was amazing, just to see how it wasn't him, it wasn't his own choice to be so angsty and so angry at the world. It was passed down to him through his lineage, through his father and his grandfather who started the war, and he was meant to continue it, but they shamed him because as a patriarchal man, he couldn't continue that forceful and negative energy of colonizing the world. And he was actually given his life and his journey to break this curse. So the fact that he was shunned from his family since the beginning was actually for a good reason, and something that you don't actually realize about him because the show made it so that you hate him in the beginning, right? But towards the end and season 3, you see how it's actually his purpose to go against his family, and yet not against the Fire Nation, because of course he becomes the Fire Lord, right? He resets the entire nation to move with love and bring repairs where it was needed after the war. The Fire Nation's colonial rule can be attested to overactive third chakras. So the solar plexus chakra right under your rib is responsible for power and control. I talked about this in my polarity video, where the two poles of the third chakra are what you're fighting, what you want to win over, and you. So there's this constant fight, and you, which would be the Fire Nation in this case, was actually winning over the others, doing that by conquering them and by putting their first chakras, which is the chakra of survival, at overactive or underactive, just fighting for survival at all times. But in the Fire Nation's eyes, they were winning, they were colonizing, and they were fighting to win. It was a competition to them. They went so far as to abuse their power and create ruthless violence and even genocide of the Air Nation. Air nomads, I should say. That's what they're called. So Zuko's personal journey was also quite spiritual. He was raised by his uncle, the Zen uncle, who found truth in contradictions, who found peace where it usually isn't, and taught Zuko that there's good in the bad and you can always fix things no matter what. He had a lot more lessons, and Uncle Iroh was wiser than the wisest man. That's why he was given a spot in the spirit world in Korra, if you have watched that. And through those lessons and through his journey, he was able to heal both himself and his nation. So as you can see, he was given his heritage in order to learn from it and fix his heritage's abuse of power and set it all right. Number 5, Wan Shi Tong's library were the Akashic records. Yeah. So I actually watched the show before I heard about what Akashic records even are, but when I did learn about them, I was like, wait a second, I've seen this before. I've seen this in Avatar. Wan Shi Tong's library held all the knowledge of the entire world, of Avatar's world. Isn't that amazing? If you're a knowledge lover, if you're a geek or whatever, I could spend so much time there. Being even a bibliophile, like I could spend eternity just reading books in there. Shout out to all my introverts. Wow. The amount of stuff you can learn in there, the amount of things that you could fix or create or innovate on just by learning from the books in Wan Shi Tong's library. If you don't know what the Akashic records are, they are a spiritual phenomenon that you can access knowledge whenever you need it. You basically connect to your inner self and you ask your body or your God self, whatever you'd like to call it, your higher self. You ask it a question. Usually yes or no is what works best. I actually referenced this in my Trick Your Anxiety video, which I'll link above. You can ask your body whatever you want. So there is an infinite store of knowledge that you have access to, and most people don't even know this, right? We don't share this with everyone, but I do think we all deserve to know. So going back to Avatar: The Last Airbender, I realized, why weren't they that sad when it sunk into the desert? I was totally devastated when I saw that Wan Shi Tong's library sunk into the desert, and Wan Shi Tong decided that it wasn't worth it to hold all this knowledge if humans were going to abuse it. And that's probably why most of us don't know about the Akashic records. And even if you do, if you just learned it from the first time from me, or if you heard a concept similar to it in the past and you denied it, right? That denial and also the not knowing of it both coincides with the fact that we don't deserve all this knowledge. Now imagine if there was an actual location that was Wan Shi Tong's library. If that library existed in our world, imagine how many people would go there and access it in order to abuse power, just like the Fire Nation did in ATLA. It's not worth humans' knowledge to go and access these types of things. Only the people who are connected to their higher self and their spiritual self should have access to this. Now, I'm not going to go into what is spiritual materialism, saying that spiritual people are the best people, or that we are better than others, we only have access to this, and yada yada, you don't. But the thing is, in order to access your higher self, you do have to have a certain amount of love in you, and you must have cultivated growth, even if it's not spiritual, although people like me will say everything is spiritual. Only those people who are going to access this knowledge from a loving place are the ones that should have it. And as a kid, I was literally devastated seeing that library go down, but at the same time, I noticed that the characters, as they were walking away from the library, of course they were sad, but they weren't as devastated as me. I really did not feel that they were as devastated as I was. Like, I was on the brink of tears and I was shocked, like, how could all this knowledge be lost to them? But alas, they must not have been that upset, because you can access this amount of knowledge whenever you want. In fact, for Aang, he could connect to his ancestors when he became more spiritual and more aligned with his avatar state and previous avatars to ask them whatever question he needed. So I definitely think it's worth going on and starting your spiritual journey. If you are a lover of knowledge, this is a great way that you can go in tune with things that are beyond our physical and even scientific way of learning things. The spiritual realm has so much more knowledge than you could ever imagine. If knowledge is what motivates you, I personally have a lot of Aquarius placements, then I highly recommend starting your spiritual journey, and you can check out all my videos for that, as well as leave a like down below because I work hard on these videos. The sixth one is the fact that Ko, the face stealer, was a very, very dark, sociopathic narcissist. He was so far onto the dark side that he needed to rely on love and the energy of love in order to continue his work. Basically, any emotion on your face, he would steal that from you, right? You would have to go up to him completely straight face, poker faced. This is quite interesting because the dark energy of this world always requires light energy, loving energy, in order to fuel it. So dark sucks the energy and love creates energy. It gives it out. When we express emotions on our face right away, right? It shows that we are okay with being vulnerable. We're okay with seeing other people show their emotions and to show our own emotions and express what we feel inside. So being more emotional is higher aligned with love, because when you're loving, you trust others to not abuse that emotionality. Now, whereas even if you don't know a narcissist in your life, even if you know a toxic person, you'll know that they feed off your good energy and they convert it into bad energy. They take your love and they turn it upside down and they turn it into fear. All emotions of fear. Fear is not just being afraid, it's being stressed, it's being down, it's being depressed. It's a lot of different things.
Show no fear. Show no emotion at all.
I talked about this in my love and fear video. You can click here for that. Narcissists are aligned with the dark side because they suck out this emotion from you and they use it to continue and fuel their work of continuing and sucking out emotion. They haven't learned where to create their own energy from, their own loving energy. So you would have to go up to Ko the face stealer with a poker face because he cannot see you with any type of emotion. Aang had to go there for a certain amount of information. He needed to ask Ko a question, and yet he had to practice his poker face intensely to talk to him. So if you need something from a narcissist or a toxic person, that's what you have to do. You have to go up to them and show absolutely no emotion and just talk about the logic and talk about what you need from them and then dip. So it's quite interesting that the creators of Avatar used the concept of narcissism for Ko the face stealer. I don't think many people have recognized this, but Ko the Face Stealer is truly a toxic and manipulative spirit. And of course, dark spirits exist in this world as well. Everything is not just love and light. Just like in a spiritual realm, everything is not love and light. So Ko is one of those dark spirits. He'll steal your emotions to add to his never-ending collection of faces, of emotional faces. So he is never actually satisfied with how much he steals and how much he drains love from you. That's also another trait of toxic and narcissistic people. The seventh thing I have for you is the fact that Korra was a powerful bender, but she needed to get in touch with her spiritual side. So this shows us that even when we are very intelligent, even when we are very talented or strong in this world, we need to become in touch with our spiritual side, and that actually heightens our journey and aligns us with our purpose more. I recommend you watch this movie if you're interested in this concept, called A Peaceful Warrior. The guy was an athlete, he was a gymnast in a college team. And he was facing roadblocks. He knew he was talented, he could do whatever, but he just couldn't do it because eventually his mind is what got in the way. His discipline and his spiritual self, his spirit, is what got in the way of him performing as much or as best as he could. This guru of his taught him all these Buddhist philosophies, and it's quite beautiful, so I recommend you watch the movie. I won't ruin it for you. The second season of Legend of Korra was especially dedicated to spirits, and this shows how much of her journey was about spirituality. Korra went on to meet all the spirits that used to live in harmony with humans until they stopped respecting them, right? Until they stopped even giving them a notice and stopped being loving to them, which is what the type of energy that spirits are more aligned with. And they respond if you go to them with love. This is the same for animals and plants actually in this world. If you go to them, you approach them with love, they respond to you immediately and they want to come and love you. I mean, not just plants and animals, but everything actually. This reality is a mirror of us. I won't go deeper into that, but the spirit world is totally a metaphor for that in our current world. There's a part that I especially love in Korra, which was when Rava and Vatu were fighting. Of course, this was like the most intense fight ever. Literally, the forces of love and the forces of fear, dark and light, are head to head. And when Vatu got so big that nobody thought anything could ever defeat him, it was the scariest thing in the show ever. Korra still managed to pull out a tiny Rava from the heart of Vatu, because in the heart lives love. Even if everywhere else there is fear, she pulled it right out. And you know what? This is what I talk about with gratitude, because gratitude recognizes even the goodness in the bad. So gratitude transmutes fear into love just by recognizing I'm grateful for whatever this and this taught me. I'm grateful for this and this happening because I was able to grow from it. When you start gratitude, you actually are grateful for the actual small good things. But as you start to do it more and more, you start to recognize that gratitude is actually more necessary in the hardest times, in the times when there's most fear and darkness in your life. Because at those moments you recognize the love that is there. And Korra pulling out the Rava from Vatu was what gratitude exactly is. And I will not stop raving about gratitude because it has changed my life for the good. I've made 2 videos about that already. I'll link one of them here. You can find the other one on my channel. There's never a moment when only fear exists and love is not there. Love is always there because these two things cannot exist without one another. This is the duality of this world, and that's why it is always possible to pick out the good and the bad. Even if you don't have your journal, but starting out you do need to journal to learn what gratitude journaling teaches you to do. So this is the ultimate way to reprogram your mind to see the good in the bad. And lastly, the 8th one, I wasn't sure if I'm going to talk about this, but why not? There is the yin-yang, right? The duality of all things. In the episode, the last episode of book 1, I believe, in Avatar: The Last Airbender, you saw that there was yin and yang. And those were represented by the fish in the spirit lake the Spirit Oasis. Oh my god, I forgot the name. I'm so sorry. It's been so long since I watched the show, but it's still so close to my heart. General Zhao came along and wanted to harm the moon spirit. And which one did he choose? He chose yin. He chose the white fish that was circulating in order to weaken the waterbenders during the full moon, so that they could never become strong and overthrow the Fire Nation. I mean, of course, that's abuse of power. So why was it that Yue, the moon goddess who helps repair the moon, was about water and about the moon? Why was she about the moon, right? Why wasn't it the black fish that was with the moon? And even if like the black and white thing, of course, moon is white, like white fish, right? But you could say the moon is black. It's dark when it's a new moon. So why not the black fish, right? And this is because yin is the divine feminine. The divine feminine I talked about a bit earlier in this video is Mother Earth, and it is our bodies, and it is our lineage, our roots, what we touch, what we see, and what our senses come in touch with. It is actually the moon spirit and the divine feminine that we also have to respect as part of our spiritual journey. Water and earth are the feminine elements, and air and fire are the masculine elements. So in this case, the divine masculine, fire, was trying to conquer the divine feminine, water. And it's quite interesting because divine masculine is also in this reality, but it represents the fearful energies. You could call patriarchy, colonialism, the divine masculine. It's basically the same as Vatu trying to overthrow Rava, right? But there's always this back and forth. This was just one of those incidences. Of course, colonialization and patriarchy is so painful to everybody, and yet the divine masculine represents pain, it represents fear, and there will always be a balance of that in this world. That doesn't invalidate anybody's experiences, but sadly and happily, this is the duality of this world. There is the masculine and the feminine divine energies that always play and work together to form what is our world and what is reality and what we know it to be. Awakening is also recognizing that there is so much pain, at the same time there's so much love. But we can choose to align with whichever one we'd like to. And choosing love means we will receive more love. But that does not mean that fear will be eliminated from this world. But we have to learn to transmute fear into love through different practices such as gratitude and meditation. Of course, meditation is like one of the best ways. In all spiritual communities, they recognize this. But it is the awareness of these two polarities, of this duality that is constantly in this world and constantly contradicting as a paradox that exists and will never cease. We can never cut out fear. We can always choose and teach others to align with love, but it's impossible to cut fear out. That's just how it is. And I don't know why I'm sad, because there's love in this world. Like, there's beauty and love and togetherness and communication and emotionality and art and music and so many beautiful things that we have to go towards, rather than becoming involved with toxic people, fearful energies, all of that. And I have stuff on my channel for that. You can check that out. Thank you for sticking around. I love you, and thank you. Bye bye.